Sometimes I was absolutely positive that life itself wasn't somewhere else, but right there at that table. Sometimes we'd argue about something, the lost royal cemeteries of Argentina, the gravity on Mars, how long a person could hold his breath underwater, why it was dangerous to ride motorcycles in Istanbul, the shape of chimney rocks in Cappadocia, prompted by nothing more than something we'd seen on television. Sometimes Füsun would rise from the table after supper and go over to Lemon's cage, where after a moment I would join her. Sometimes I would say to myself, it's good that I came here tonight. Sometimes the silence that consumed us would have a mysterious air. Sometimes it would snow and it would stick on the window frames and on the sidewalk. Sometimes there were fireworks and we would all rise from the table to see whatever we could of the colors streaming across the sky, and later the smell of gunpowder wafted through the open window. Sometimes Aunt Nesibe would ask, "Shall I fill your glass, Kemal Bey?" Sometimes I would say, "Shall we have a look at your paintings, Füsun?" And we would go into the back room, and as Füsun and I looked at her painting, I realized this was the time when I was always happy.
Where did the idea come from to make a museum out of a love story?
The idea came about to first that to relate a story with objects, real things, and then I really liked small neglected museums. And in late in 1990s, I used to take my daughter to school, and I loved Çukurcuma, where the novel is now set, and I fancied buying a real house, and at that time it was so cheap that I could afford it with my royalties, with the money I made with my books, even in 1990s. So I bought a house without too much knowing what to do there, but to converting into a museum, setting a story inside the house. Slowly and slowly it developed. The idea of finding real objects and then giving it to the imaginary people, which then will later be exhibited in the museum. Then the love story began to develop in my mind. With this novel, I was also collecting objects, say an old lottery ticket, and thinking that I would, in fact, integrate this, make it a part of my novel.
So some of the novel came from the objects you were finding?
Lots of it. Sometimes it would be the other way around, that I would write the novel, as of course the stories have their own force. Then I would come, I needed an object, but I don't have the object. Then I would leave, since I didn't want to stop enjoying writing the novel, I would leave it with ... and look for an appropriate object or wait for it. I was taking my time. So I was both doing the real collection and the imaginary story, mingling them, intertwining them.
At the same time. The novel mentions many specific objects which are due to appear in the museum,
yes,
but rarely spends very much time describing them. Is there some sense in which the two are necessary for each other?
I cared about the novel first, yes, the idea, writing a novel and also founding a museum in which the objects in the novel, or in fact the aura of those objects, in fact the atmosphere of the novel represented, stayed with me from the beginning to the end. But I never thought of describing objects minutely, because from my experience of reading other previous novelists, from Perec to Alain Robbe-Grillet, proved to me that that would kill the novel. I'm not that, at least I'm not that kind of novelist.
But readers can appreciate either the novel or the museum, one without the other, or?
Yes, definitely. You can be a reader in Korea, you can be a reader in Argentina without even realizing that there is such a museum. In fact, there is not such a museum. I haven't still opened it. I'm working hard on it. The novel comes first. The museum is not an illustration, will not be an illustration of the novel. Neither the novel is a description of the museum. They are separate entities, intertwined, representing a same story. You cannot enjoy the museum without reading the novel, but you can definitely enjoy the novel without being even aware of that there will be such a museum.
Your narrator, Kemal, describes the desire to exhibit a collection as a kind of Western notion. If novelists are in some sense curators of moments, does that make being a novelist in some sense a Western occupation?
Novels are Western inventions as well as the museums. Towards the end of the book, there is a little slight discourse on the idea of museums, that it's a Western invention, while on the other hand, attachment to things and piling them together, not collecting where there should be a logic, is common to human hearts in every geography, while putting them, naming them, classifying them, calling them collections, understanding them is in a Foucault way, and giving them a meaning and organizing them in such a way that they suggest a story, or inventing a story that would lend the objects a new meaning, a new aura, is a Western thing.
Are you resigned to some readers identifying you with your narrator, Kemal?
I am used to it, that I have been asked by especially women readers so many times, both in Istanbul and internationally, now the book is translated, that Mr. Pamuk, are you Kemal, implying that I fell also that foolishly or that humanly fell in love that deeply. My answer is that this is a novel. Of course, I did not, but this is the contradiction that lies deeply at the heart of the art of the novel, that we novelists want the reader to know that this is a fictional story, but we want to convince the authenticity of the experience through, which contradict each other, and then that's why, in fact, we read novels. Even if I say, this is fiction, it's all imaginary, I don't want you to believe it.
The prose of this English version seems much more formal than some of the prose in the Black Book or Snow, or even My Name is Red. Is that a true reflection of the prose in Turkish?
Let me tell what I think about the language of the protagonist. Sometimes he is following things very closely. Although he's telling the story 30 years later, he is there, his heart is beating because he's in love, so his language is a bit messy and he's quick. Sometimes he is talking about civilizations, museums, his moods, how human heart reacts when one is in love. Then his language is more composed, a bit artificial, more...
He loves to theorize, doesn't he?
Yes, like me, sometimes very close to the present moment, and sometimes very far away, as if a dead man is speaking from the grave about the nature of love or human heart and how it felt. So the language also changes.
Are there challenges for a novelist in choosing a narrator who deceives himself so much?
Well, I was writing about upper-class Turkish male man, happy, as a guy who was happy being himself, and in fact that was the slightly politically dangerous, incorrect thing about my novel. I was very careful about that, and I also warned my friends, my readers, just don't drop this book before you reach 150 pages, because at the beginning the guy looks too happy with himself, and you don't like. I thought the readers would not love my protagonist Kemal at the beginning, but then he begins to suffer. Then he begins to think in a different mood, than perhaps winning over the attention of the regular reader.
There's a character called Orhan Pamuk, who turns up towards the end of the book and explains how he came to be writing the novel, and suggests that there's some who have accused him of misrepresenting his family, his friends, even high-ranking officials in the government. Does this best-selling novel, The Museum of Innocence, has this gone some way to restoring this Orhan Pamuk's reputation?
I was also curious about that, not restoring the image of myself or whatever, because there was such a long campaign by the right-wing media against me during the last 5 years. So I said, did I lose my readers? But I'm happy to say that my readers were there and they enjoyed the book. But reputation, political figure is another thing. Just this book just sold as much as, or read as much as, say, My Name is Red. So my readers were there.
There's another Orhan Pamuk, at this time a creation of the media entirely, who found himself on a hit list of some gang who was supposed to be trying to overthrow the government. How does it feel to you to read about this other Orhan Pamuk and his adventures?
Well, this other Orhan Pamuk and this gang, unfortunately, is not literary, they are real. I hope they were imaginary, and so that's why unfortunately, I have a bodyguard in Turkey.
Gosh. And living like that, is it possible for you to work as a novelist, as an imaginative writer?
There's look, so many people suffered before me, not only in Turkey, in so many countries. I don't want to go too much into it.
Kemal says in the book that, like most people in Istanbul, he says, I wasn't much interested in politics. Is that true of his circle?
It is definitely true of Kemal, and 99% of upper class bourgeois in Istanbul, that they are not interested in politics, which is a dangerous thing. And it is 50% true of me too, especially in my youth, that I'm not a political person, that I care more about the beauty of a sentence than politics. That's definite. I made this clear so many times.
For Sibel, his intended, at the beginning of the book, the word modern is never far from the word European, which seems only a step away from some kind of allegation of sexual permissiveness. Is that how, again, in that circle, is that how the word is used in Turkey?
Modernity was invented in Europe, of course, but associating modernity only with sexual liberation and or women's liberation, there is truth, of course, a deep relation, is a bit oversimplification. I sympathize with Sibel. In fact, I did my best to identify with everyone, not to point saying, you know, this one is a bad guy. I did my best to respect my characters in this novel.